Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and we're delighted to have you join the fourth of the Adara Webinar Series to support SMEs. This session today is accessing COVID relief. We're very distinguished, and we're honored and delighted to have distinguished participants in our group today. We have Toyin Adeniji, who's a director at the Bank of Industries. We have Adara Osakwe, who's a founder and CEO of Agrolay Industries. One of her more famous brands, of which there are 10, is Nuli Juice. We also have Osayi Alile joining today from ACT Foundation. So the conversation today is going to focus on, not so much, quite frankly, on the CBN intervention fund, which obviously we must speak about because it's important. What we do want to do is talk about other sources of intervention and other ways that SMEs can find financing and find their feet in these very terrible times that we're in. So Adara Foundation, I'll just talk a bit about that, is a foundation that was founded by myself in 2016. Our mission was very clear. We saw that women and youth, we wanted to be part of a number of parties and organizations, public and private sector, that contributes to enabling women and youth to be more active in the socio-economic development of Nigeria and Africa. The way that our own form of intervention is really mainly through training, education, and financial interventions. Some of the core pillars of our fund, of things that we have done so far, is the skills training. With skills training, we've done things like teach women how to do textile design. We've had entrepreneurship workshops, for example. In addition to that, we've also done health outreaches, going to communities to do health outreaches. We've done a lot of work with women and youth and communities on financial inclusion, going around educating low-income people about the financial implications of running their business and generally living their lives. We also have scholarship programs. Our most famous is the one with Oxford University, where we support an MBA student to get a qualification. It goes back to the premise that we have as an organization, that where we educate and train and support people, we truly empower our nation. We also support arts and culture. Another way, what that does, and the reason why we have that, is it's a very important part of actually enabling us to promote our culture in Nigeria and beyond. As we started coming through this corona crisis, because it will pass, it shall pass, and considering how really terrible things are coming, not just from a health perspective, but also looking at the economy as well, we decided to take a more razor-sharp focus on supporting SMEs more directly. At Adara Foundation, we have a very firm belief that if SMEs are better supported, well organized, well funded, and given the right levels of support to grow their business, that they will actually be a key catalyst in leading us. All indications are that we will be in this in a recession for the next 2 years. And we were looking at recovery happening anytime between 2022 and 2024. So this session is very important for that reason. What we've done today is purposely stay away from having policymakers on this call, because we want to have a good conversation about what is available, and in addition, serve back to them what is needed from a policy perspective. Obviously, Mrs. Adeniji from Bank of Industries will touch on some policy matters, but the real point is we'll then have a follow-on session with the policymakers, who will then bring this to life from another perspective. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand on to the first participant that is going to speak today, Adara Osakwe. Ada, what we would like Ada to do in the first instance is just tell us a bit about her role in the SME world, not just as a SME business owner, but the interventions that she does in the sector. Importantly, the interventions that she's aware of. Ada on this call actually has access to CBN intervention. So she's going to be a very important person to help answer questions on how exactly you do it and what other, and she will also speak importantly to some of the other interventions that are out there. And after that, we'll go on to Mrs. Adeniji. I'm sorry, we'll go on to Osayi Alile, and she will talk from an NGO perspective and looking at from the angle of grants and how organizations can organize themselves to tap into some of the areas where grants are being given and perhaps pivot their SME businesses into those areas, as well as access some of these grants. And then last but not least is Toyin Adeniji, who will speak to us about some of the great work that BOI is doing, not generally, but importantly for SMEs. It's an organization that's doing quite a lot, so we're very excited to have her and frankly, all of them on this call today. So Ada, without further ado, thank you very much for joining, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure, Yvonne. I just want to thank you and the Adara Foundation for your consistency on bringing to light issues that SMEs are facing in Nigeria and ensuring that we get the tools to try and not just survive, but thrive after this. So thank you. So from my end, Yvonne, as you know, I wear the hat of not only being an entrepreneur, an SME, a small business owner, but also being somebody who invests in other SMEs. I truly believe in the power of capital to ensure that businesses thrive. So I put my money where my mouth is, and I also invest. So I'm able to see things from that perspective. And indeed, as the COVID pandemic started digging into our society, it was very clear that we needed help. SMEs were already a group that were already having issues before any COVID happened. So SMEs were a sector that accounts for over 80% of the workforce, 49.7% of our GDP. And yet, for some reason, we are forever having to try and amplify our voices, feeling that we are not being served, given the important role we supposedly play in the Nigerian economy. So there were already issues. So by the time COVID struck, and you begin to read how other countries are dealing with things, and there was a big focus on bringing out funding and making sure that SMEs survive because they are the lifeblood of economies. They provide jobs. So to ensure livelihoods are maintained, people were putting money towards that. And we didn't really see the same reaction here in Nigeria. And that really worried me. As a result, I became quite vocal about how not just the government, but even private sector, bigger players, banks, and all of that should rally behind to ensure that we don't lose the jobs in the SME sector. We saw a bit of movement, and I'm really glad that apart from the central bank putting out their 50 billion naira of funding, we shouldn't forget that that was just the SME and household piece. They also put another 100 billion towards the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector, which for all intents and purposes, this is a health pandemic first, and we have to ensure that Nigeria is ready for that. It was very important the way they strategically also put money towards that side. So things are going on. I also liked hearing that some banks were being quite empathetic and putting moratoriums on existing loans. But then there are other sources of financing, as you mentioned. But it's important that we have to put out the fact that everybody had to look to the government because it was really difficult. Every sector is holding on to cash, even the banks. So it's very difficult at this time. But indeed, the banks, I would really want to say that that's one area we should still look at. But specifically, some of them have been very innovative and quick to put out small loans, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, easy access, leveraging technology and automation to ensure that SMEs can access these loans quickly, just a few clicks on your laptop. So I want to, and then some loans that were specific for people who have jobs, who still have jobs, that you just need quick cash flows. I need 1 million, I need 500,000. And this makes a big difference. So I just don't want people to lose sight of that. If you don't know about it, ask your bank. there are some pockets of funding there that small and medium enterprises can access. And in general, Yvonne, just so that I close on this first intervention, I just want to say that we really have to look inwards and look at ourselves, because I truly thought that this would be a time for our government and different players to think differently in how they interact with SMEs, and knowing fully that this was an unprecedented moment. It was no one's fault that we all ended up this way, but how can we all come together and work together to address the new normal that we face ourselves in? But I don't feel like there was enough of that that attention and understanding that this is a critical situation. It's now 4 months on, and it's only now that the government has brought out their economic sustainability plan, 4 months on, that obviously, yes, has some money dedicated to SMEs, but that's, if you could take 4 months to just bring it out, I wonder what execution is going to look like. So that worries me. I'll pause now, but I'd love to later talk about other sources of financing like equity interventions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ada. Before I go on to Osayi, I really wanted you to talk a bit about how you've managed to access the CBN, the Central Bank of Nigeria fund, 50 billion Naira fund that was specifically dedicated to COVID relief. Okay,
so I did the application online. I see I still get a lot of messages coming to me of where do they go. The government made it, the central bank made it easy. They put it with an online application. You can get the application from our website, Small Business Network of Nigeria. It's in the access financing section. You would see the link. You can apply. I believe they are still taking applications. The last counts, I believe they had received quite a few applications. They've approved over 14,000 approvals, and they've only disbursed to about 5,000. So I think that's really sad, but it's a capacity issue. Not many people are able to review this. On my end, Yvonne, you know, I'm usually very frank about these things. Mine was really using connections and phoning everybody I knew to try and access that money, and ensuring that the people who are part of the small business network as well got that money. So that's really what I leveraged. We put in everything. We definitely are deserving of the funding. They obviously still assessed our ability, but to be able to finally get it, I still have been asking, I want to see the list. I want full transparency and see the list of those who have received, because I still get messages from people saying they applied since April and they've not received. But I know they're trying hard, but I think we need to move quicker. It's an urgent issue.
Okay, yeah, so we're getting some commentary through about the disappointment around it having to be through connections. So these are some of the feedback that we'll pass on, because at times like this, it has to be the customer experience for accessing the loans for individuals who simply just can't even think straight or see through the next few months. They're juggling how they deal with the changing customer demand that they face, or the disappearing customer demand that they face, disappearing business models, staff that they don't want to fire, and being able to have this a much easier process is something that I think we all need to continue advocating for. And I know that you're a huge advocate of that. I think you spoke a little too fast about SBNN. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that is another area that, of support that helps people to access some of these funding and just share information on where money is available. So if you can share about
I mentioned earlier how I was very upset at how the government had reacted, or their failure to react to small businesses and our plight at the beginning of this crisis. This led to me starting an online petition for the Nigerian government to do more for SMEs. It then led to us putting a 10-point policy recommendation that we sent to the Vice President. He even responded. We sent to ministers in the cabinet, and it's good to see that some of the things we listed in the recommendations actually ended up in their plan. And then it then finally led to, okay, we realized that yes, you have the Nigerian Small and Medium Enterprise Association, NASME, you have the Nigerian Small Industrialist Association, you have, I can go on and on the types of entities that are out there, but yet you were still getting people saying they have no voice. They didn't know who to speak to or who to guide them. And frankly, I believe many of these organizations have been very politicized and not in many cases small businesses who actually run them or who are part of them. So we decided to start the Small Business Network of Nigeria. Started off as a network, but right now we have just finalized the registration as a nonprofit organization. And this is really an organization to represent the voices and the interests of self-employed people, small and medium enterprise owners, and really advocate for their interests and also provide the necessary support services. So that's really what we are. We have a website. Within that website, we provide information on financing. We provide information on, and we speak out. We speak out when there are issues that we believe affect the community. And yeah, that's what we've been doing. And we're really excited. We have now some of the forward-thinking banks have reached out to us. So we would be having service providers or partners that we certify and we work with, who can then start providing targeted solutions, both financing, structure and advice for businesses. Even at the end of the day, I really just want to make sure that we have winners. Let's stop all the piecemeal, small, and then let us be very deliberate about the types of businesses we support and the types of entrepreneurs we support, so that we can look back and say there were some big winners out of this, and this is what came out of Nigeria.
Absolutely. It's got to be about that deliberate, cohesive, collaborative approach to supporting SMEs. And one of the news we wanted to share, just for people on this call who have not yet heard about it, the IFC has a fast, let me see what they call it now. They call it the...
track financing or something.
Yes, their fast track financing support. And under that program, they've done the first intervention into Africa through a $100 million donation, investment via Zenith Bank, which will come through the way of loans. So this is the reason why we're having this call today, and we'll hear a lot more of these types of interventions throughout the conversation. If you're keeping your eye only on the CBN $135 million equivalent, you're missing the boat a bit, because not to say don't apply for that, but please, there's quite a lot of stress there already. And importantly, there are other avenues like the IFC intervention for Zenith Bank. Again, people like Adara, organizations like Adara Foundation and SBNN will be onto Zenith Bank, challenging them to make this a very, very user-friendly process where bona fide businesses that are genuinely thinking about their way through this crisis can access money quickly and with relative ease. So I'm going to go on to Osayi now. Osayi is another huge advocate that's seeing things way beyond her space. And Osayi, again, if you can just talk us through ACT Foundation, its reach and scope, how it's supported SMEs today, interventions that you know, ones that SMEs can pivot into, and ones that are grants that you're aware of that they can access, or organizations that give grants that could be accessed. And then just some advice to them about how to survive in this time. Thank you.
Finally, hi everyone. Such a pleasure to be here, and well done to Adara. I see your work, and of course Toyin and my big six Yvonne. It's a pleasure, because this is such a topic that we all talk about in our different spaces. And one of the things I also realized, based on what Adara said, is that we tend to do things in isolation. And the truth is that we have to come in as a force. Your voice is heard louder once it sounds off together than a solo voice. And we just have to find ways of managing everyone together, partnering and collaborating, and seeing how we can push this thing forward. So with ACT Foundation, people see us as a non-profit. We're a foundation giving out grants to SMEs too, because the truth about it is, even if it's an NGO working in the communities, they're still small, medium enterprises, just that, of course, their focus is on doing well and doing good work in the communities. So that's the same, it's the same thing we do, just in a different sector. And all our sectors are still in health, in environment, leadership, and enterprise. So that those are kind of social enterprises that we support. And we've been doing this now for 3 years, and funding, not only in terms of funding financially, but we also help in terms of capacity training, building institutions, building leadership of organizations as well. Because one of the things we've realized, and I think also this pandemic has shown us a lot, that a lot of the SMEs we work with, their foundation has not been built to a point where when this kind of things happen, that they can survive past a certain time. And I know it's not easy, and I've seen it. I mean, I've been on two sides of the story, funding and also looking for funding as well. And I know that it's not as easy as we always say it is, but it's something that we should all think about while we're going through this journey. And while we have some time we should begin to rectify a few of the things that we see. And as we also begin to ask and try and get funding into organizations, when we see the criteria, we should realize that even if we don't get it, there's some things that we can play around with, rectify, clean up a bit, so we're even prepared for the next level. So those are the things that we are also trying to do, because we want to build and create sustainable businesses in the sector. Because we're also, these are investments, no matter how you say it, even if we call them grants and investments, which we want to look back in the next 10 years to be sure that the organizations are still standing. One of the things I'll say, Yvonne, is that one of the issues we have, I was talking on a group yesterday, and I said a lot of times when we are looking for funding, we tend to be insular to what we know. And I think Adam mentioned one or two things. You look at what you are comfortable with. And even we that we are funders, in this pandemic time, we started looking for other people that were giving out grants and asking questions, because we knew that a lot of our grantees or our NGOs might not be able to access those funding. So we were going to people, give us the money and let us fund. You might not know who the people in the community that are doing the work they're doing, but we know them, we understand them, we know what they should do, and we will monitor the programs ourselves. Because you can't have everything. We don't have all the money, and that's why when Yvonne mentioned you can't look to government alone, we just can't. We have to start opening our minds, looking outside of the box, thinking of new things, new ways. And this is the best time to network, the best time to ask questions, speak up. As Adara said, if you don't shout it out that you have an issue, nobody's going to come to everybody has their own problems. Even as Nigeria is dealing with this, sometimes when we have pandemics or we have issues, it will be maybe only Asia has the problem, so everybody goes to go and help Asia. Or Europe has the problem. Now the whole world is dealing with all sorts of things. So we have to think outside of the box. We have to start looking for new measures and new ways and new people. And the networks that you thought that were not necessary to get in touch with all of them. Ask questions. Even if you think I'm only in health, what's happening in enterprise? How can I connect with enterprise? What's happening? I don't even know who BOI is. I've never really asked them for it. I don't care about them. Find out, what are they doing? We just have to begin to shout out louder, but in a more strategic way, not just screaming for screaming's sake, but as Adara said, come up with points that make sense. Why do we need this? Why are we asking for this? I mean, even with us everybody knows, when I'm asking for funding now, they know I'm not looking for the funding for my organization, but we are coming up with explaining the reasons why we're asking for funding for this particular time, and explain that the funding is just for 1 year, just to allow the NGOs to sustain themselves and to survive through this pandemic. So we're not looking for long-term funding at this particular time. And we are the ones that are going to monitor it. And, so we have to think, and it's not something that I would necessarily have thought we'll do, because we are not implementers. And we don't get funding outside of what we know. But we have to think outside the box and think of what are the issues that people are dealing with and how best can we help them. And what I've also done with a lot of the SMEs, social enterprises I'm working with, is that even if you're not getting everything now, what do we need to do? How do we strengthen your foundation so you can survive during this time? What do we need to do different? And looking for volunteers to work with them, even at in what we will call like a downtime for quite a few of them. I mean, a lot of our enterprises, they're not doing any work in the schools at the moment. So I'm saying get familiar with technology. What are they doing? Who knows it? go and collaborate with them, work with them, consult with them, give what value are you bringing to the table as well, and what are you changing in terms of the way you have been doing things in the last 5 years, in the last 10 years, or even the last 6 months that needs to change and needs to. So everybody is reinventing. So you even if you don't know how to do it, there's so much information out there, and you have to get yourself on top of those things to say, how do we do better and what do we do now? The only other issue that we have in the sector where I work is that you don't find a lot of NGOs collaborating and partnering to get work done. So we are also pushing for, because the more you work together, the more you do things together, the easier it is for us to accomplish a lot of goals. I also sit on a committee for the COVID, coalition for the COVID with the private sector. And I'm one of the administrators. When we wanted to do some work with the nonprofit sector, I mean, one of them came in to speak with us. And I said, you can't do this thing by yourself. We're going to local governments across Nigeria. And even Lagos alone, we have 20 local governments. So how are you going to get people at the same time? Oh, I'm not used to working with people. I said, you have to go and find them. So this is the time that you have to draw in every resource that you have and find out who is doing what are they doing, and how can we work together to accomplish the goal. And you find out that it was easier for us to give them the funding for that, because I knew that it wasn't just one person. There were 5 of them working together, and I knew they would be able to, manage themselves while they're going through the journey. So we have to think outside the box, find out who is there. There's funding available in the nonprofit sector. There is funding available. It's not as well. People are still looking to the big players. Go to the second grade, the third tier and all that, and begin to ask for smaller amounts, ask for specific funding. And there are a lot of Nigerian organizations, indigenous ones. Go to Donors for Africa, they're online. They are doing all sorts of things, and people are actually asking them to look for NGOs that are doing different things. There's African Philanthropic Forum. I mean, those are great resources to have, because anybody that is bringing money into Nigeria, they go through one of those people. So this is not the time to work in isolation. This is not the time to say, we've done it this way for the last 5 years and it has worked for us. This is the time to begin to open your mind and your eyes to see what else is out there, and begin to find some people in your own little community that you guys can come together and then begin to do some things together and begin to work together and say, okay, what do we need to do to move this to the next level? How can we get the funding? But I've seen a lot of people still get granting at this time. It's not as easy as it used to be, but you must be very deliberate and very strategic about how you're asking, one, how you're even planning to do, because of course there are a lot of things that you can't do in one-on-one anymore. And then also, what networks do you have out there? And if you don't even have networks, who does? And how can I get involved with those people and say, okay, what value can I add to the table so we can all do this together? And those are the things that, I mean, like the network that Adara started now for that sector is also good for. So the nonprofit, we're not as organized. A lot of us are not organized. These things are just, a lot of things are done in very ad hoc manners. And things go wrong, and then we start trying to, grasp on anything we can grasp on. But if we begin to plan even now, and because other things are going to come up, I always tell people there must be lean years and there will be fat years. So we can prepare for those lean years that are going to come. So we have to begin to think and work together now, put our heads together, begin to plan, okay, after this is over, what next? And be prepared for any other thing that comes our way. But there's funding available, but we need to connect to the right sources.
Forgive me. Osayi, thank you so much for that intervention. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions before we move on. First one is, can you just share with us a few more details? So you did mention Donors for Africa and Africa Philanthropic Forum. Which other organizations are you aware of? These webinars, we try to make people things we can try to give people things that they can go away and do, perhaps even while they're listening to us on the call. So if you can share with us some of the other organizations that are looking at, are giving grants at this time, or one other area that I wanted you to talk about in terms of just pivoting is, what we've realized through this crisis is we don't have many organizations of scale, even in the social enterprise sector. So are there opportunities for people to provide training, services, project management. So why is what stops an event manager who knows that parties are not, huge parties are no longer a thing of the foreseeable future, from using their project management skills, their networking skills to deal with large projects for some of these larger organizations like MasterCard Foundation, like Visa Foundation. And part of what we should be thinking about as a collective, when I say collective, I mean like-minded people like us on this call, is how do we, when we hear of those opportunities, share that information so that people can think, okay, I'm going to use my project management skills to help roll out a financial inclusion program in Aba or in, somewhere, obviously, safety rules permitting. The other question is, what sectors do you think are particularly important at this point? When I say importance, I mean where it's just less hard and less brutal to try and to stay alive in at this point.
I like the word less brutal because it's actually so difficult at this time to even to start a business. I mean, people that plan to start things this year, when you hear that talk, you almost want to go back under your duvet and just go and sleep, because she's been doing this for so many years and the struggle is real. But the truth is that, health has become such, we all know health is difficult to get into, but it's one of the things that we all have to begin to work. And then, of course, enterprise. Small businesses will still, regardless of what we say, it's still important for us to put the fuel into those businesses, because if you're talking about when the vice president is telling us about the millions of people, 40 million people, that will be out of jobs by the time this pandemic is over. He even said by the end of the year. Then we are all afraid. We're wondering what's going to happen to us next. So those are the things that we can still look into. You see, what I also suggest is that a lot of times people want to start off on their own. Someone like Adara wants to do a few projects, and these are their strengths. You can come in and say, okay, I can work with you for the next 6 months, project manage for the next 6 months, or for the next 1 year during this time. And then also, as you're doing that, you're also learning on the job, because this is the sector you want to go into. But a lot of us, like any other thing, even when people want to start NGOs in Nigeria, I tell them it's not everybody that should start a foundation. But if people just feel that, my name must be attached to something, we can always work with other people, find ways of getting involved with what they're doing, and then learn as we do those things. So those are the ways that we can get involved and put our value and our expertise to use instead of waiting till all this is over, and don't stay idle. The other thing, I remember with Kako, we had a few people that came in as volunteers, and then we realized that their value was so great. We started one day, and then we brought them in as consultants. These things do occur. So you have to realize that you can give, and then you'll be willing to take after a few months or stuff like that, instead of doing nothing. There are organizations. When I talk about organizations, Ivona, a lot of people are looking to the bigs. Of course, the Fords, the MasterCards are all in town. Some of them, I know Ford is still giving funding, but MasterCard has kind of pulled back. I know that there's supposed to be a lot of funding in Nigeria, but at the moment they're kind of waiting for some things to take place before they start disbursing. But when I mentioned Donors for Africa and African Philanthropy Forum, because they're an umbrella body, so they do know when quite a number of people have come in. So it's not just one organization; they can actually lead you to other organizations. And there's so many resources online as well that specify what is available to Africa, what's even available to Nigeria, and you can always apply. I'll say this also. Once you have the basics in place, don't be afraid. I always say you can apply for 10. You might get 1, you might get 2, but some people say, I applied even for my grants. Someone told me that I applied last year, they didn't give me. So there's no need for me to apply again. And I'm thinking, are you joking? I remember when I was at Faith Foundation, I applied for a grant for 8 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, before I got the grant, and they still get the grant till today. Sometimes these things do take time, and it takes a lot of, you have to do a lot, and then you clean your act, you go back. But we want things like anything else, microwave fashion. It doesn't work that way. You have to sweat. You have to, people must see that everybody's working and striving and pushing as hard as they can. And are you sleeping at home? You're not sleeping now. And I will tell you that I have 3 bottles left in my office. Come and buy it. We need to all, it's something that you just need to use your vigor and everything you have. This is not the time to say, oh, people must know that I'm there and I'm doing my work and it's great work. Yeah, they know, but you just have to get involved, Yvonne. So that's my own thinking. These organizations are there. Look for them, get involved, find them online, join the conversations, even if you're not sure. I'm in a lot of subcommittees doing a lot of things. Some of them, I know that it's not web, but you pick 1 or 2 here, you move. You pick 1 or 2 things here, and you move, and they find out as best as you can what's available. We're trying to list out all the different organizations, something like we can send later. But there are quite a few of them that are still funding today.
We'll hold you to that, because we're very keen on really giving people lots of information to get out of this. Just the other thing that we wanted to share with participants on this call is really all of the organizations on this call. We're committed to gathering information that makes life easier for you. Through Adara Foundation and SBNN in particular, we will help to disseminate the knowledge that we have around what is happening and where. Osayi, thank you so much for that. I just want to mention a few sectors where I see money coming in, and one of them is clearly healthcare. There's so much around the healthcare space now that is commanding a lot of attention. Watch that news again and again. As we're following the COVID numbers, let's also following where the interventions are coming into. In the primary health centers, the reality that we have right now is that we don't have enough wholesale infrastructure, if you will, large hospitals to take care of these, of all the potential patients that may arise, God forbid, from COVID. But there are a lot of things that are coming to light now. And the good news is that the public and private sector are focused on how they can make longer term interventions into the sector. So that's one important one. Technology, superbly important. How many of us now are starting to work offline, rather online, forgive me? And how many people are starting to use technology in a much more efficient way, because we realize it just makes life cheaper at some level. So there's so much more that's coming out from those kind of sectors. Food, retail, different kind of training right now that's going on. So these are some, we'll keep mentioning some of these things right throughout the program. But I'm dead keen to get to Mrs. Toyin Adeniji, who's going to talk to us first about what Bank of Industries is doing. What I find exciting about her is she's always thinking about ways to move the needle forward for the economy, and SMEs is something that she's particularly passionate about. So Toyin, I'm going to hand over to you to please share your perspective on these points.
Okay, thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you to Adara Foundation for inviting me to be a panelist, and I feel very comfortable in the midst of sisters and friends, as my co-panelists. There's been a lot of energy already, and Osayi, thank you for all that energy, just sort of very encouraging and also very upbeat. So with BOI, I'd like to just go straight into what we do and what we're doing, even right now in the midst of all this chaos that we find ourselves in. So as we all know, the Bank of Industry is traditionally a source of credit or source of funding to all sectors, to all segments, in terms, especially in the real sector. So we do cover pretty much the whole gamut, from micro entrepreneurs to SMEs, and then to even large enterprise. And so we kind of just work across the entire space. What makes the Bank of Industry unique is that we also do a lot of hand-holding. So we tend to handhold, we tend to sort of be touchy-feely. And then also our loans and our products are longer tenured in terms of the duration or the term of the loan. The pricing is also lower. And so that also makes it attractive. And we do fund capital asset acquisition, and we also fund some element of working capital. But generally, we do span quite across quite a lot of sectors. So the COVID, is very topical. Not has been, it's very topical right now, and so a lot of SMEs or MSMEs are in real sort of dire straits, really, in terms of what do they do. This whole COVID thing has hit us, and as Osayi said, it's global. It's not just Nigeria. It's not just Africa. It's now global. So everybody's just really just. I mean, there's really no magic bullet. There's no answer, but everybody's just sort of doing what they can at this point in time. And so it's a real economic meltdown. And of course, the government in its own way has risen up to the challenge and come out with different palliatives. And I can assure you that there's still more in the offing to come out. So we just hope that, with the newer ones that come out, they'll be more efficiently deployed. So what has the Bank of Industry done, or what are we doing? So traditionally, as I said, we're a lender of credit, and we do work across all sectors. So we have, as a lot of people know, we work in the micro and SME space. We work on, we have gender desk, we have a creative desk, we have agro processing, food, we have health and pharmaceuticals, which are like #1 at the moment. We have logistics, which we're also trying to rev up on. Education coming up, just, hospitality, a little bit. And so we do cut across quite a lot of sectors. And as I said, I've been saying we're a traditional lender of credit. But one of the things that we're doing now, and certainly I am very, very excited about, is the whole moving out of that traditional space and saying, what do SMEs really need? And how can we really be there to meet their needs? So the traditional way of doing things is you come with your proposal or your feasibility, we look at it, we appraise it, we say if we like it or not, and then we give the loan, and then we have the usual terms, and then we ask for your security, and et cetera, et cetera. So security is big because our loans, as mandated by the Central Bank of Nigeria, have to be secured. So our loans are secured. But what are we doing now is that we're looking outside a little bit, going, and I think earlier on it was mentioned, going outside of the box. What are the new ways of funding these MSMEs? What are the new ways of looking at MSMEs? What do we need to do so that we can really address that need? And so we find at BOI today, yes, there's still the traditional lending, but we're also looking at a different way. So the whole idea of looking at either sort of blended sort of credit. So it's not just traditional, but we're now trying to pull in other sources as well. So equity is one that certainly Ada did mention. Equity is one way that even the Bank of Industry is sort of very softly going into equity as a source of financing as well. So we have invested in some funds, which will be looking at SMEs in Nigeria, and we are looking at a few others. Today, we are looking at a tech fund, which will look not only at tech-backed sort of SMEs, but we'll also look at tech-enabled. So in the space of, agri-tech, health tech, edu-tech, food tech, anything that is able to sort of become more efficient. And today, that is critical, especially with the wake of COVID. I mean, digitalization is nearly the key, is one of the big outcomes or the big fallouts of COVID, as we are seeing in this space as well. So we're also using tech to drive lending as well, because as I said, traditional is come to me, I look at what you're doing, I go and do all my credit appraisal. But with tech, using technology and data to drive that is something that we are looking at very closely. We're already doing it. We have already worked with some providers of capital, of that kind of capital, and we're looking to back more of them. And basically what it is how do we use data to drive to drive the approval or the process of giving credit to MSMEs. And so, and not, so we are looking at using those sort of big data sets. What can we do with the data? How do we handpick them and use data to actually drive and process the credit? This is something that we're looking at very closely, something that we're very passionate about. And it's the future. That is the only way we can reach the SMEs. That's the only way we can scale as well. And that's the only way we can also remove some of those bottlenecks that SMEs are seeing today. So that's sort of in terms of where we're going. We do the traditional lending. We are looking at newer ways of funding as well. And that's something that is ongoing and it is being taken very seriously. With COVID, what are the sort of specifics and how have we handled, or how are we handling this sort of in the immediate sense? Well, of course, under the leadership of the president, of His Excellency, the President of Nigeria, he immediately said, give 3 months moratorium, try and reduce interest. But what we have done at the Bank of Industry is that even before that came out, we had immediately gone to the table and said, what do we do? So we have actually given moratoriums of up to 12 months in terms of saying, you know what, we're in this with you. Just hold off payments. So this is time to downtime, get your act together and see how you can really take on the market. And so that is something we're doing. We've also reduced our interest rates. But the good news is that we are still lending. We haven't stopped. We are still really intensifying, well, maybe not intensifying, but we are still working closely with that group. We do recognize the importance of MSMEs as the engine of our economy, and also in terms of job creation, which is something that, because as you know, a development bank, impact is big for us. So job creation is something that we're trying to preserve jobs, we're trying to create more jobs. And so we recognize that this is where this can be secured. So we are very much in that space. For SMEs, what do they need to do now? I think, again, it's already been mentioned that this is the time to really sort of take stock. This is the time to also pivot in terms of your operations. This is the time to say, who are my customers and can I sell what I'm doing? Because there's no point, if I've been making product A, B, C, and now people are not interested, or the sort of new era of social distancing and new era of sort of being a little bit more inward looking. No one's going to buy it. Then you really have to. It's time to pivot. It's time to take stock and say, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to meet my customers? I'll give you an example. During COVID, one of our customers mentioned that he used to in the agri sector, he used to take his goods to mile 12, and that was where the bulk would be broken. So that was where the bulk. So he would take his things to the bulk market in mile 12, and then he would retail from mile 12. And he found out that during lockdown he couldn't do that. So, but his farm and his produce was still, he was still working on his farm. What did he do? He said he found out that using a digital platform, he could reach his retailers. And so unfortunately, he found out that he could do business directly with his retailers without mile 12. And he actually found out that he was doing more business without mile 12. And so that was sort of a revelation. And so, of course, that was something that he would continue doing. But what does that mean for mile 12? It also means it's also an opportunity to see what can we do with mile 12, because that bulk breaking is also very important. How do we use digital to transform mile 12 as an anchor to meet these SMEs, and so they offtake from the SMEs or MSMEs, and they also retail to the end users. So these are the kind of opportunities that MSMEs have to be looking at now. Using technology is not an optional thing anymore. So Yvonne, you mentioned training. Can event planners, can they now start thinking about training, or who can train? everybody needs to be training now. So those are the kind of things that also need to be done. And BOI is also a stakeholder in the support to, so beyond providing access, BOI also is a supporter of MSMEs in terms of the empowerment programs we have. We do have our business service development program, but even beyond the business development service providers, we as an institution are also keen to support. And so we're open to seeing how, especially at this time, how we can empower our stakeholders, which definitely include the beneficiaries. So I'll stop here at this time, but happy to take questions.
Before we go into Q&A, and I'm about to launch our first poll, but there are a couple of pertinent questions that have just come up. Toyin, thank you very much for during your discussion. One of them is quite simple and straightforward. It says, is it right to go through the BOI registered agents to access BOI loans?
Yes, in most cases, the answer is yes, because what the agents, what they are there for is they have been trained, and so they do know what the boxes to be ticked before a facility is sort of looked at from the BOI end. So the short answer to that is yes. But in a situation where an SME is also coming to us and they have a very good command of what they want to do, well written, ticks the boxes, that can be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But in a lot of times, most SMEs are so involved in other things that it's always, they're usually advised to pair with a BDSP provider.
Another question that I have, and this is the last one before we go into the first of our polls, is BOI should at some point in the session give us a percentage of how drivers of social enterprise can access their loans.
How drivers of social enterprise. Well, I mean, what I would say is, as I said, BOI loans are commercial in the sense that there's an interest, it's priced, so there's an interest element, so they're not grants. That's number one. Number two, BOI loans are secured because the central bank, who is our regulator, directs. We have to give out secured loans, otherwise we will be contravening something that is required by the regulatory authorities. So for social enterprise, where they are unable to, one, pay an interest, to provide some sort of security, it could be difficult if it's labeled as social enterprise.
Okay, okay, so we'll come back to that. And so right now, Adara team, if you could load up the first poll. While we're waiting, Ada, I'm going to have you please chip in on the practicality of having secured loans as a criteria for SMEs, if ever at all, and particularly at this time. So our first poll really is your view on the outlook of the economy over the next 12 to 18 months. Of all the people on this call, how many are optimistic, moderately optimistic, stable, who think it's stable, and who think it's really quite bleak? The reason why we're asking this question, we want to just understand how much of the SME proportion, what proportion of the SME community, understand the current economic environment that we're under, and because that would be, and also just what their perspectives are. So the numbers are coming through, and they're quite interesting. People think the outlook for the next 12 to 18 months is moderately optimistic. We stopped the polls now. I'm going to share the results. So 59% believe that the outlook over the next 12 to 18 months is moderately optimistic. 18% believe it's optimistic, and only 18% believe it's bleak, and another 5% believe it's stable. Very interesting, because unless there is something particularly special that people are doing, it is quite bleak for the next 12 to 18 months. And if people are looking at this, I'm sorry, Ada, you wanted to say something?
There's something they know that we don't, or maybe it's just the typical Nigerian optimism, and we're so.
By God's grace, yes.
I think this is one of the times when, a part of what we're doing is really to share with people that things will not get better unless we start to do something, perhaps something different about how we are operating today. And before I go to Ada to ask her that question about, and again, we need to rub our minds on where policy is working and where it's not working, and just have some good conversations about that. But there's a gentleman, Prince, who owns an arts and culture, well, actually he owns a tourism agency that is currently out of business completely. And we so empathize with you on that one. And I could barely pay the few people working with me, and my rent kick out at the same time. I tried to access the grants in different ways, including the central bank loan, but my application is yet to be granted. I really need to know what to do next. That is a very long conversation that the one thing that we would say right now is, if you don't change your business model, it's going to be really quite tough. So in terms of the areas of arts and culture, let me share with you. So I spoke a bit about arts and culture at the beginning as one of the areas that the foundation provides support to the economy. What we are finding is, if you're looking at arts and culture from a power of employment creation and empowering the youth, for example, or if in my case you're particularly passionate about women, empowering women as well, then there are opportunities. So you might want to take your tourism business and reinvent how you're serving the economy. If you continue to just try to provide tours in this time, I just cannot see how you can have a positive outcome for the next, I would say, at least 12 months. So leveraging the tourism networks that you have, leveraging all the arts and culture that you, I assume you promote through that, you need to be focusing your lens more on opportunities that you could go into that could create employment. And that's when, or empower the youth in particular. And that's when particularly, I would also suggest looking more at the grants that are available, and looking at more of some of the impact related initiatives out there. What we will do on the Adara Foundation website, which is still being constructed, the developers promise us that it will be up and running. We'll have something that is interactive next week. As soon as we have it up, we will be posting a lot of the great intelligence that we've had from the panelists that we've had on the series, and also the research that we've done, as importantly. So Ada, just a bit from you on your thoughts on this requirement for security, and how can we solve that?
You obviously having been on the lending side when I was at the African Development Bank, you kind of understand what that is, right? You have to get some sort of security for payback. But I think for us as SMEs, we think, but BOI is a development bank. You're for us, why are you asking all the same things a commercial bank would ask for? Or why are you asking for a bank guarantee or one letter or the other? So I think that's really what SMEs struggle with when we're dealing with the development institutions here. And we hopefully would see something different. So I think that it's necessary, but there are other ways to maybe take care of your money. There are other ways to potentially put your security on maybe revenue proceeds, increasing the asset-backed security. I love the fact that there's now a movable assets register. So now we can put stuff like generators, and you say, okay, I have this generator here. This is how much it is, and you can put that as a loan But yeah, it is what it is, and we have to think differently. One of the things we put in our 10-point recommendations as SBNN was for the government to put a 50 billion naira credit guarantee scheme, partial risk guarantee, and I see it's in their report, which is fantastic, because that's something that had not been done. So it's nice to see that they pick that out of our policies, however. And part of it is supposed to be channeled through Bank of Industry as well as other institutions. And with this risk guarantee, it means that you can now go to a commercial bank, or you can now go to a Bank of Industry, and they now have about 50% of that, whatever loan you're taking is already covered by the government. So hopefully this will then reduce the requirements for security and making it a lot more accessible, loans more accessible by SMEs.
Thank you so much, Ada. Osayi, question for you. This is Fidelis is saying, please, we really need information on accessing grants at this time. So, as wearing the hat that you've worn, as you described earlier, or as a grant giver, and also one that seeks grants as well to enable other organizations. And I dare to say, the first time that we applied to ACT Foundation, this is Adara Foundation, applied to ACT Foundation for a grant to roll out the financial inclusion program, we were rejected. It was a very friendly rejection, but we were rejected nonetheless. However, we went back and said, what was it that we didn't do right, and how did we need to improve our programs to get the much needed support from ACT Foundation. And the next time we went back, we were accepted. So back to I think it was Toyin that made the point earlier that even if I think it was Osayi yourself actually, who said, look, even if you get rejected, it doesn't mean you don't go back again and again. And since then, thankfully, by better understanding where their interventions lie and what the requirement is actually to get what they need, we've been able to access some funding. So Osayi, over to you to just share with us 5 or 10 tips, if you can, on what practical things that people can do to access grants at this time. And from your experience, what are you can do 5 do's and 5 don't do's, the things that people just do all the time that your team look at and think, oh my God, why did they send this through? So if you can just, help us with that, that would be brilliant.
The first, let me do the do's and then I'll do the don'ts. I'll just give the 5 things that I take very seriously. Apart from, of course, knowing what you're doing. A lot of times people are kind of focused on so many things at the same time. They're not focused on exactly what they're doing. So you find out, you see the proposal, they're doing health, they're doing enterprise, they're doing quite a number of things. So for grants, because we're not asking for any payback, we're asking for the commitment, and we want to see the results. You have to be very careful about what your focus is on. The major thing now is also the governance structure. Who are you answerable to? We're not asking for, we just want to know that there are people that, apart from yourself, that you listen to, and not family members, of course, people that, it doesn't have to be people in society that we know personally, but we need to know that you're answerable to one person or the other. And then even if it's not audited accounts, are there management financials that we can look at and see that you're spending the money the right way, and stuff like that. And of course, your sustainability plan, of course, and then now social media is key to me. A lot of times when I see a new organization, the first thing I go and look at is their page, or even Instagram. What are they doing? Because if I can look back in terms of their history for the last 2 years, it enables me to kind of understand what they're doing and where they're coming from. So those things are important. What you shouldn't do, a lot of times people, the first grants they're asking for you to practically build a home for them in the village. You say grants 300 something million for an organization that their budgets this year is maybe $1 million. So don't go out of you. Don't ask for, you want to build, no need for the house in the village this year. No need, just do things that are specific, and then you begin to build the relationships gradually. And then once you begin to build the relationship, it's easier for them to even come and ask you that we have this new grant out there. Do you want some extra money to do one or two things? So be careful on that regard as well. And then come from a point of view believing that you're also there to learn. A lot of times you see it and they will tell you, people, we do interviews, people will tell you, you're not the only one that's there, we can go and find money somewhere else. And I'm thinking, we're all here to learn. So come with a mindset, open mindset. So don't come with an attitude of, you know everything. Nobody does, I don't either. And I'm learning daily. So those are the things. Of course, do not, someone came for a meeting, they brought him, his wife, the wife's sister, and a child. Don't come with, even if family members are involved. When you're doing the meetings, come with other people that are not just family. Because if you're the head of the home, you can bully all of them now. So we'll know that you're going to bully them anyway. So try and avoid bringing your family members. Just bring other people that are involved in the business. And if you don't have, then you have to find other people apart from family that are involved in what you do. Those things just put up a red flag, and we're all kind of worried about it and wondering what will happen if something happens to you and stuff like that. So those are the things I will look out for.
So I have a question. Thank you so much, Osayi. I have a question for Toyin before we go back to our next poll question. Simeon says, personally, I think it's wrong giving loans to SMEs without training them. So I advise that the emphasis should be based on training first. Toyin, what's your view on this?
I think it's a two-edged sword, really, or two-edged knife, really, because yes, you need to train so that, you know, to help them maybe use the money better and make sure that the money comes back, especially when it's a loan. But also for an SME that needs funding, it needs funding. So a lot of times with SMEs, it's very difficult to say, hold on, you know, I need to train you for the next X period of time, and then maybe that opportunity is lost. But so I think it's a general rule of thumb that says, yes, we do both have to be combined. And that's why apart from the Bank of Industry, there are many institutions out there that do this, that do their way of supporting SMEs or MSMEs is by way of training in skills that would help them. It could be things. Today, there's a lot of training on using tech tools, trying to sort of digitalize some of your operations, understanding your accessing your market, understanding your records, understanding your brand, things like that would help SMEs. So training is critical, and there are providers of training that are just as important. So at the same time, funding, you know, is also usually top three in terms of what are the specific needs of an SME. So both have to be done together, and beyond BOI, there are lots of institutions that make this happen.
If I can just interject, is it okay, Yvonne?
Absolutely.
Because I'm seeing a few people saying they agree with Simeon and saying that you have to train before you give the money. I actually don't. I believe it's important, but you should fragment and put your different SMEs into buckets. Some SMEs don't need training. So I've been very big on trying to promote to the CBN or whoever else that you should understand the SMEs and do tailor-made financing for them. We shouldn't all be put in a bucket. Some people have progressed a lot, maybe the micro or whatever. So I think it's important that even as we look at SMEs, Simeon, Olayinka, they're not all in a bucket. They really should be looked at their different specific circumstances.
Okay, that's great. We're going to have the next poll now, Adara team. Okay, so what are the key challenges? What key challenges does your business face? Is it accessing finance? Is it keeping a sustainable business model at this time? Oh my goodness, we have 100% accessing finance at this point. Is it human resource management? Is it cost management? Or is it some other thing that we haven't talked about on this call? And perhaps you want to flag that through our chat or program session. we're not surprised. The polls are coming in and accessing finance has gone from 100% to 76%. Sustainable business structure is the next more important thing. Again, we've spoken a lot about that on this call. We'll talk to you about the kind of interventions that Adara Foundation is doing to help support sustainable infrastructure business models at this point. I'm going to end the poll. Oh yes, my team has ended the poll. And yes, so 78% believe that accessing finance is the issue. And then the sustainable business model is the second largest issue. And then the third is human resource management, and then cost management is the fourth, and nobody else had any other things. So this is clearly, these four topics are clearly the most important things that that our policy leaders, other actors like ourselves need to be focused on. How do we get these SMEs, how do we help them access the financing? So one of the things that so in terms of training, let me go, I'm going to go to training first and then come back to the access to financing topic. So with training, I agree with Ada that you have to stratify organizations, and that will determine whether they need training at all before they access your money or before they access available funding. I do, however, think that if we look at the bulk of the SMEs and MSMEs in Nigeria, there is some training that is required. And from the research that we've been doing, so behind these webinars, we're running workshops as well, out of which we will evolve programming. So one of the core areas for intervention with us in line with the Adara vision is to train in a very targeted way, as well as advocacy and also helping to find sources of funding. But in terms of training, the feedback that we're getting from previous webinars and also just from the interactions that we've gotten from our workshops is people want to have training on how to market their businesses digitally, because that will increase their revenues. People want to understand what sustainable business structures look like. And this is something that's really very important to a number of businesses. And I'm just highlighting these because as well as us at Adara Foundation, other organizations that believe that they want to support this sector from a technical support perspective should really hear and understand that the SMEs are keen to build sustainable business structures to support their business, and they see that as a key way to survive COVID. Managing their human resources, making sure that it's effective and at the right scale is another key issue that has come up a lot. How they make their businesses technology driven and more technology efficient is another key one. And accessing finance is by far one of the largest ones. And it's not so much them being aware that IFC has now given money to Zenith to support the COVID initiative. It's how exactly can they get that money? And one of the things that we want the organizations on this call and anyone else who's listening, quite frankly, and we certainly will be doing that, is just demystifying the application process for some of these for some of these challenges. So BOI, you're the only lender of on the call. I'd like to solicit some sort of commitment from BOI to please make it easier for people to understand what is available for BOI, from BOI, and just hold SMEs' hands a bit more. So even if you, if the one thing you do after this call in your role of influence in the industry and in your company is to say to your website team or your social media team, just come with solutions on how it's clearer for people to see how they can get money. I think you would be adding greatly to a very widespread problem that clearly BOI is just one of a number of organizations can help resolve it, but that would be great. Osayi, you were going to say something before I move on to the next question.
Yes, I was actually agreeing with you, Yvonne, because the truth is that A lot of these trainings, I understand, I totally understand where Adara is coming from, not everyone, but sometimes even when you are not able to access the funding, when you do go to any of these trainings, the kind of information you get that enables you to get involved with the organization going forward is very, because you're sitting in a room or now online and you're meeting people, understanding. I mean, I've been seeing names here, I'm looking at the organizations that they're working with and the kind of questions they're throwing at me. It helps people to understand what are they looking for, and then you can bring that value to them. And it also lets them understand where the organization is thinking and what is pinching them and what they can bring also to the table. So I think all those things, it helps. Even as you're going along the journey. So there are different types of training, of course, and at different seasons while you're doing your businesses as well. And it depends on the kind of funding you're looking for.
Okay, thank you so much. I've got quite a lot of comments. This I'm going to share this comment. Maybe I shouldn't. Prince Uduak Pedro has shared with us that IFC also gave 50 billion naira to FCMB for the same purpose as the Zenith Bank loan. So again, we have Zenith Bank, we have FCMB, organizations which thankfully I'm familiar with. So I will be, one of the follow-ups from the Adara perspective will be for them to advocate for them to be very clear about how SMEs can access this loan with ease and hopefully on realistic terms. I think one of the policy issues we have is just getting the government, rather the regulatory body of the financial sector, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria, to understand and create some sort of flexible approach to how SMEs are lent to. It's going to take a lot of data and digital intervention because obviously there is a very good reason why they at this point insist on security. But if we can think out of the box about how using the data it's able to help to make more responsible transactions, that could be a very good thing. I have another question that I'm going to just send to Toyin. Please, what is the lending rate, security involved, payback period for startup businesses from BOI?
Lending rate is usually between 10 to 12%. And sometimes it all in could be 13, 14, but usually 10 to 12%. So the actual interest would be about 10%. There'll be some other costs. You could drive it up to about 12%. And then, you know, depending on what kind of security you're bringing in, it could also add another 1 or 2%. So it's, I would say, max you probably be about 14% all in. In terms of tenor, it could be anything from 3 years to 7 years would be fairly typical. A 1-year moratorium would also be fairly typical. It could be 6 months, but it could be up to 1 year. In terms of security, it depends on what the amount is and depends on what sector you're in. But, you know, today we already talked about sort of risk sharing instruments that are coming up. This has been in discussion for a long while. The Bank of Industry itself has been championing a lot of the discussions to get some sort of funding from the government to help shield SMEs, and it appears that this is going to yield some fruit, but we're yet to see, you know, if that will happen. But it is top of mind, and it is likely. We hope it will happen because that would really help us a lot. In terms of a startup company, it is going to be difficult to get funding for a startup. If you've never been in business before, BOI is, unless it's a very specialized program, BOI probably is not going to, it's not going to be easy to just come to a BOI and say, you know, I've just finished school or whatever, and this is the first time I'm going into business, I need funding. That usually is is best done through other means, at least to kick off the business, where there's no experience in doing business. But
sorry, carry on.
I was going to add to that. Just I peeped at the chat, and I see a lot of questions also coming up in terms of security, in terms of, can BOI fund, can they take land as security? Can they fund this? Can they fund that? And I think, the truth, because I like the Adara concept of just saying it as it is. The truth is that SMEs need access to funding, and there is a huge funding gap in this market, like in other markets as well. SMEs also work within an ecosystem that needs to be supported, on different aspects. So the ecosystem involves not only funding, it involves, yes, the funders, the people that provide funds. It involves the capacity building stakeholders. It involves the government. Today, it involves technology. It involves the digital space. It involves the markets, the infrastructure. It involves, the tax systems, both formal and informal, and they're different pieces. And so funding is one of the pieces, and the jury is still somewhat out on that. So there is a lot of interest, both locally in terms of resident capital. There's also a lot of interest from other providers of capital, but but there's a need for it's still, there's no magic bullet. So Bank of Industry, again, is one of the providers, and I believe there's still a lot that we can do better, or we should be doing. So we've talked about hand-holding, and yes, I agree. With platforms like this and webinars or conversations like this, for us, it's a takeaway to say, look, is there more training we should be looking at that we're not looking at? Or are there other ways that we should be sort of clustering or looking or engaging with our SMEs that we're not? And I think those are things for me that even as a development bank and as with other development institutions, that we need to go back and really figure out how to make sure that we're able to deliver on that promise. Yvonne, you mentioned at the beginning that these webinars are a series of conversations that you're having, and one is certainly going to bring back the policymakers, I'm sure, like the CBN, like maybe some of the regulatory authorities. And I think these are questions that need to be posed, and to get answers to that. How do we make sure that these ecosystems work for MSMEs, so that they can thrive and so that they can grow and not just sort of die under the weight of all the challenges that they have to meet?
Yeah, thank you, Toyin. Adara Foundation is one of a bunch of organizations, SBNN, Osakwe, particularly as an individual, are just not going away. We actually believe, ACT Foundation as well, and of course BOI, we believe that this is serious. If we don't support the SMEs more, and funding is huge, the training is also very important, and the infrastructure within which they operate has got to be better. Someone mentioned earlier that, yes, it was Adara that was mentioning about the vice president talking about 40 million Nigerians potentially losing their jobs. McKinsey is arguing that 450 million Africans will lose their jobs as a result of the corona crisis. 300 million of them are in the private sector, and at least half of that number, or about, I should say, or about half of that number will be accounted for by Nigeria. So even the numbers are quite staggering, but there is a lot of intervention out there. We're focused on pulling it all together. We're focused on building a bigger crowd of organizations that do that. We're very sure that we will succeed. It will take time, but we'll get there. It's time to wrap up. So in the spirit of practical conversations, I'm going to go right round the room, starting with Osayi, and then Adara, and then Toyin, just to say, what are your parting words to this audience in terms of how to move forward and survive in this COVID pandemic, and anything particularly vis-a-vis accessing finance, etc. We're collating all these wise words, we're putting them together, and as soon as our website is up, we will be sharing these much more holistically. So, Osayi, over to you.
Yvonne, I didn't hear you at all, sorry. Hello?
I was saying, do you have any final words for the audience on what they might do to survive COVID and at this time?
I mean, the world is not how it was. If anybody has a ready solution, I know that we're just saying what we think because no one has ever walked this journey before. So my own advice that is working, that I'm trying to use for myself, and everybody has theirs, because I wish there was a playbook we could all read and we'll just be out of this in a few days or in a few weeks. I'm trying to look, first of all, stay sane. So like any other organization, I think sanity is first, not just your own sanity, but sanity of your staff, making sure that they're healthy and they're sane in the mind as well, and making sure that everybody has an access to be as whole as they can be. And then in terms of the business side of things, if you do have any other loans out there now, or you're working with people that you have, anyone that you have worked with in the past few years, this is the time to have conversations. Even if you have applied for a grant, you've never gotten it, or you've applied for a loan, you've not gotten it, this is the time. I think I've been saying from the beginning to speak up, ask questions, and be a bit more open to listen to the new things that are out there, and be ready to change your mind about the way you've been doing things. What worked in January of 2020 is not going to work in June of 2020. So we have to be a bit more flexible, a bit more resilient, and also willing to collaborate and partner with even the funders. All the things that they're saying, willing to just turn things around a bit and go there. But first of all, keep your sanity and just move. You can't stay in one spot. I gave an example of us swimming in an ocean, and you see yourself in the middle of the ocean. You can see there's land on the other side. We're not going to stop. So we have to just kind of keep moving. Like Nemo, just keep moving and we'll get to the other side of this, hopefully. And as Nigerians will say, by God's grace.
Thank you so much. Ada, if you can please share your part.
In addition to what Osayi has said, I think for my end, I'll just add that if you're an entrepreneur today, we're going to get through this. So all I'll just say is that it's a tough time. So we have to think creatively to do a lot more with less. We definitely have less. So how can you push yourself to do more with less and think creatively and innovatively in the process? Yvonne, I see questions here trying to say that BOI should be hand-holding people. BOI is not there to be hand-holding.
Absolutely.
Not for startup businesses and all. So I would really want us to have a conversation maybe on that equity piece that I spoke about and how people can think differently about how to get started and the kind of financing that's available. So yes, do a lot more with less. If you have to move and change industry, do it. This is going to last for a while. So do a lot more with less. That's what I'll leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you. Toyin, if you could just close off if you can give us your final words, and then I'll just do a quick round off.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. I think I'll just piggyback on the speak up. What I think it was a side that said that you've got to speak up. This is the time to speak up and reach out. A lot of people spend a lot of time sort of bashing on what is available. So, oh, BOI will not do this, BOI can't do this, oh, they're horrible, oh, they're this, but they've never actually come to BOI, or they've actually never approached BOI, but but they just sort of pick up on what others have said. So my own advice is,
but they may not be suitable for BOI to lend to. That's another thing.
But they have. But sometimes it's based on wrong information. So I'm saying that if you're an SME, BOI works from the you know, very, very small amounts to very, very, you know, large amounts. So at least come there and get first-hand information, and don't be pushed. Don't take, you know, at least make sure you're at the table and you're getting the accurate information. So I think that's one bit. People sometimes don't really have that information. And I think we also have to do a bit more in terms of getting that information out and making sure that our narrative is sort of very clear and well articulated. The other thing is that today you've got to also learn how to pivot your operations. This is the time for technology. If you're an SME and you don't know how to put yourself out there in less traditional, sort of outside the less known track, you know, if you don't know how to use your smartphones, if you don't know how to get yourself on a virtual platform, if you don't know how to close or access your markets or your resources through by using technology, you're going to be missing out. Today, a lot of funding is coming by way of technology, and if you cannot, you know, get onto that space, it's going to be very, very difficult. So I think this COVID time is not the time to sort of sit back and say, you know, everything is not working. It's a time to really think outside of the box and make it happen for yourself.
Thank you so much, Toyin. I want to, on behalf of Adara Foundation, I want to thank our great panelists for their invaluable contribution. I want to thank our participants for staying with us and engaging on this very, very important topic. I note that there's 12 questions that we still haven't answered. What we will do as an organization is try to get the answers for those for you where they're not just comments. So I see one about BOI helping with feasibility studies. Those sort of questions, we can go back and try and summarize them and get some answers for you. As I said to you before, the webinars are only one part of the interventions that Adara Foundation is doing to be part of creating a very cohesive drive to provide directed support for SMEs, not just in terms of accessing finance and demystifying how they can fund their businesses, but also providing the training and the technical support and some of the policy advocacy that's needed for this important sector. We will be coming back with another few engagements, whether they take the form of another webinar or perhaps even a workshop. But at that point, particularly on this topic of accessing COVID relief, we will bring more lenders to the table and government and policy officials. Please look out for our website. We have a lot of things that are initiatives that we're doing. The webinars is just one of the many initiatives that we're going to do to help solve this topic of fueling economic growth in Nigeria at this time. Thank you so much for your participation, and we look forward to engaging with you soon.